Welcome along, one and all, to a monumental day in APPF1. We are, of course, right in the midst of APPF1 Championship Week, and now we hit the next chapter of that story with the Tier 1 finale. Of course, if you are used to watching Tier 1 in APP, you're not used to hearing my voice. Usually this tier is covered by the wonderful Louis L. Day, but because he can't be there tonight. Instead, I've had to fill in. Normally, I'd be racing on the grid, but instead, I'll be covering the action for all of you tonight. So hopefully, we get a great show put on for all of us, because with 9 rounds gone and 1 still to go, the championship still hangs very much in the balance, and it's going to be decided by 2 drivers who probably weren't expecting to have this sort of opportunity earlier on in the season. So can't wait to get that underway. Drivers are already heading out onto the circuit, and hopefully we're going to have a great evening of racing. So of course, the championship is coming down to 2 drivers, Palang and Glock, and my oh my, it is going to be a thriller. Of course, Palang hunting for his first Tier 1 title. He heads into this final race with just a slender 2-point advantage. Meanwhile, Glock, just trailing him, is in his first full season in APP1 pursuing that title. He's really announced himself to the league over the last 9 weeks or so, and looks to try and pull off the upset here tonight. Of course, there are 16 other drivers on this grid that we've got to cover, that we've got to keep an eye on, so that's going to be thrilling all around. Let's see how it's going to get on. Just quickly, before we get underway, I'd quite like to turn down my game audio because it is extremely loud. There we go. Just whack that down quite a bit and carry on with the former champion MX piling through that first corner on this reverse layout. Of course, that is the battleground for this event this evening, and well, it is going to provide quite a few surprises. Of course, it is a circuit that the drivers don't generally run around, so we'll see how MX first of all is able to get on, flying it through turn number 5, keeping the throttle pedal, a little bit of battery up towards turn 7. This is, in my opinion, the most difficult corner on the track, an endless traction zone as you get the throttle pedal down, eventually opening up that DRS and barreling down to the other critical corner on this track in terms of lap time. Downhill braking zone into the hairpin, flicks it into second gear, another tough traction zone on the exit. You can see him using that curve, trying to keep the car nice and balanced. He's through the first 2 sectors in 48.2, which is around the ballpark, but I think you're going to see quicker times throughout the session, probably from MX himself as well. Through that final corner in 4th gear, opening up the DRS and getting onto the board with a 104.4 to get things kicked off. That's pretty good for a start. We'll see how it gets on as Bald, the Season 14 champion, comes up towards the line. I know it says whatever that name is on the screen, but I'm going to refer to him as Bald, I think, for everyone's sake, further down the line. Koru goes into position 2, solid lap. Of course, the rain dancer, the wet specialist, goes into P3 for now, because he is replaced by MS Palang, of course, coming into this round, riding the crest of a wave, on the hunt for the championship, and getting this session off to an ideal start. A 104 flat is very, very quick. He goes just about a tenth and a half ahead of Hugo, who of course dominated the Tier 2 race back on Tuesday, and has certainly demonstrated speed to be up there on the Tier 1 grid, and is showing that today, going up into third. You see a wide mix of times coming in, but of course I am keeping half an eye out on Glock, who's decided to hang back just a little further behind most of the other drivers before getting the lap underway proper. So we're still going to have to just wait and see for now where he can stack up. His championship rival has gone off to a dream start. A 104 flat is very competitive, but it is not the fastest out there. Bald, who I believe on his second lap, a 103.892. That's extraordinarily fast at this stage in the session for a banker lap. So the former champion, recently back in action in APP Tier 1, is off to the best possible start, going clear and ahead at the front, ahead of Palang. So Bald getting off to the strongest start. We'll see how this is going to go, as I'm keeping an eye out on the Discord chat as well, or the paddock, so to say. Glock has commented saying this is Palang, congrats on the title, which does not sound very optimistic. Also, the murmurings in the paddock is that we're going to have a rain in the Grand Prix, so that's certainly going to throw something of a curveball out there. Of course, we had a wet race in Tier 2, or rather an interslick race for the duration of the Grand Prix. We've lost Lewis from this session. That appears to be in the pit lane. Not actually sure if there's any quali bans outstanding. Glock flicks it in very aggressively over the curb at the final corner. You saw the rear head of the car stepping out. Glock comes over the line only 7th, a 104.6, nearly at 6, well, more than 6 tenths down on his championship rival, nearly 8 tenths down on Bald's pole position time. So, Glock, not the ideal start up to this point. We'll see if he can find more time out there. Kevin O'Reilly is navigating in that Red Bull, getting a nice clean exit, heading off of turn number 8, just over a 10th of a second up. Try and find more time. He can put himself at the very least up there with Denko if he finds a good last corner. A little bit wide of the ideal line on the entry through the apex, but we'll see what he can manage. Comes up to the line now and does a 104.5. By the way, not sure why I was mentioning quali bans for Lewis. He has already set a time. That was a rather nonsensical statement from myself, but nevertheless, his session is over at this point, and we'll see no more. Actually, just jumping back into the lobby, so maybe it was a disconnect. I didn't quite see. Probably had a DNF glitch. So sad for Lewis. Unfortunately, he won't have an opportunity to further improve on that time going forward. So, little bit of downtime in the session in between times. Bald's time still holding firm at the top. He goes just over a 10th of a second ahead of Palang, of course, and we're seeing second runs now getting started. MX and the Kick Cerberus still firing round. Not sure though if this is a full tilt lap. It doesn't look like it on board with him, and he isn't actually burning any battery, so that looks to be it for this current run. You see Koru running wide at that first turn. So easy to do in the reverse direction, of course, and these drivers, none of them are particularly acclimatized to this track, so you're going to see a lot of errors as these guys continue to push the limits. Sweet Ross on that entry heading into turn number 4. You saw the rear end kicked out. He does a solid first sector, an 18.8. If you're in the 18s at the very least, you're going to be competitive. Of course, mid 18s is when you're looking at some serious speed. Sweet Ross, though, still potential to improve, punching out of turn number 7, opening up that DRS. We'll see where the Red Bull driver is able to go. Another driver who's come back to Tier 1 as of late. He's going to get disturbed a little bit by the Aston Martin in front. Probably not much loss in terms of direct impeding, but that is certainly going to be a loss. A big snap of oversteer on the exit of the hairpin. He's got both the Aston Martins in his sights as he heads towards the final corner. He's going to get disturbed all the way through this though, and just wondering what Aston that is. That is Koru, so that's not Palang that's gotten in his way. Still an improvement for Sweet Ross, a solid time of 104.3. Palang gets his lap kicked off and immediately invalidates again. So easy to do on that run through turn 1, and again making that critical error. So unfortunate for Palang. He's going to have to go again. Is that going to be the opportunity perhaps for Glock to make his way back in? He's still sat in the pit lane. As I've got Zeki in the chat asking, is it 3 Q sessions or just 1? It is just a single qualifying session as Hugo goes to the top of the timesheets, and that is much, much quicker even than his Tier 2 pull time from Tuesday, and just getting the better of Bald by some 400ths of a second. But on the evidence of that first sector, we'll see if it stays that way. Yes, though, it's a single 80-minute qualifying session, then a 50% race, which is 36 laps around the Red Bull Ring later on. This qualifying session is going to need an awful lot because, well, the overtaking on this layout is much more difficult than it is in the normal direction. It's going to make a big difference where you're going to end up on the grid. As Ball comes up towards the line, he's going even quicker and finds even more time. A 103.6 is going to leave the rest of the field scratching their heads. That is a phenomenal time from the Irishman, and 2.5 tenths clear around a 64-second lap. That is serious speed as Denko improves, going up into 6th position. A 104.3, a solid time, I think roughly in line with what he did in Tier 2. There's a lot of drivers, of course, coming from the Tier 2 grid across into this grid here in Tier 1. And we'll see how they can go. Of course, the likes of Hugo was setting phenomenal pace out there on Tuesday, so we'll see if they can convert it into Tier 1 with all the competition here tonight. We are just over 10 minutes into the session already, and we'll now have a look at GLOCK. Also, just to note ahead of this race, we went into it with Ferrari just 3 points ahead of a Mercedes in the Constructors' Battle. Of course, there's a lot of talk that you're going to see in the Drivers' Championship, but the Constructors' Battle was certainly looking very much alive going into this race, but sadly neither of the Merc drivers are in attendance, so it's effectively a victory lap for the Ferraris as Palang goes up into second place. A great lap at a 103.8, and the pressure is mounting on GLOCK, of course. Between himself and Palang is definitely considered the quicker driver over one lap. Palang, I believe, with 2 pole positions on the season. GLOCK, more of a race specialist, trying to make up for it in the race later on. But like I said, it's hard to overtake around this track. We are going to have a wet race, so we'll see how that is going to affect things. But yeah, GLOCK, just the lack of raw speed may work against him here. We'll see what he can find here. It's a solid run through the last corner. A couple of bites at the steering, but ultimately fairly solid in that Ferrari. Running up towards the line, burning the last of the battery. A 104.3 is good for P7, and Palang certainly will be feeling pretty solid about his chances. That is more than a half a second difference to his title rival again. Bald is currently blowing absolutely everyone out of the water, but if Palang is up there in P2, he will certainly be taking that one. Currently sitting in second position and on the front row, so work to be done for GLOCK, but of course there are going to be opportunities. The race is going to be rain as far as I can gather from what's been said in the Discord, and well, if Tuesday's race is anything to go by, rain can certainly stir up some chaos. We'll watch Sui Ross here heading around the end of the first sector, or the 18 rather, 0.7. I believe Bald was an 18.5. Absolutely a stupid run through the first sector. Sui Ross a little ways down on that, but still tracking solidly. A little bit wide of the apex of turn 7. That's not so bad if you can grab traction, but you saw the rear end of the Red Bull dancing around, ultimately unable to quite keep it in line. We'll see if he has better fortunes. Again, running wide at the apex. That's such a difficult braking zone, and the Swede does in the end back out of that lap, so deciding better of it seems. Kevin O'Reilly, his teammate for the evening, dancing around behind him, getting that DRS open. He currently sits on a 104.5, needs to find just under 0.2 of a second to move up, but then you're looking at Sui Ross, Denko, GLOCK, all separated by just a few hundredths of a second, and Kevin can try and get his way into the mix, but I think a 48.5 through the first 2 sectors isn't quite going to cut it. Further back, the McLaren of Josh is heading fairly solidly to an improvement, at the very least, breaking down, flicking that steering wheel aggressively, heading into the final corner of the lap. He currently sits on 104.9, just barely in the 104s. He's going to find time here, goes into the middle of the pack on a 104.5. I was noting his teammate Ghost, who hasn't set a competitive lap up to this point. He's going a couple of tenths quicker than his teammate through the start of the lap, so he may be in that Sui window. He's just behind there, just behind Glocky, as half a tenth shy of the championship contender. A 104.4 is his time. Always so difficult to keep up with qualifying here at Austria. Lap times come in so quickly. 4 minutes to go in the qualifying session, and Bald still firmly on top, lapping again. Is he going to go even faster? A 103.6. That's certainly quicker than I expected the pole position time to be. Of course, right back into the swing of things in his return to APP, but ultimately not finding the time that he needs on this lap, as Wreck a Good Lap goes up into P4, also on a 103.8. So more and more drivers getting into that 103 mark. It does seem to be the kind of benchmark for being up at the front of the field, and I expect there's a lot of drivers too that have more time to find out there. So we'll see if they can manage it further down the line. As Palang, he was going very well to start the lap, but ultimately wide there at turn 5. I do wonder if that was the beginnings of raindrops. There's been an awful lot of laps being set so far in this session, a lot of intensity. And it does seem as though it is starting to rain. So this is going to be very, very interesting, and that may explain why so many drivers were so eager to get lap times on the board. Enge currently down in P17, trying desperately to move up. Glock has called his session in the pit lane there, so he doesn't think there's any more time out there on the track. These guys, a lot of them, they're going to be running out of time. MX is out there finding half a tenth. They're still gripping the circuit. We know it's going to be a wet race, and the rain already starting off early here. Is this going to be the lap times locked in the end? And will it have been crucial to get those lap times in as early as you can? MX seems to be far along, burning a lot of battery somewhat early in the lap. He's not going to have much to use for the last sector. Breaking down in his second gear. How much does this circuit still have left in it? MX struggling for traction on the exit. He keeps it in a straight line. He's running pretty well, but slightly down with no battery to use. That may be just about it for the kick server, all over the curb at the final corner. We'll see what he can find. He's just 4 tenths behind his teammate for the night, Denko, but ultimately battery is going to work against him. Palang is still trying out there, maybe with one last shot at pole position, but several drivers, as Bald is actually out the session altogether. Hopefully he can get himself back in, but other drivers are electing to... Other drivers are electing to end their session. Actually, I've just checked in the Discord chat, and Bald saying actually in the Discord, unfortunately, that he's having to leave his house, so he can't continue on out there at the moment. So really unfortunate with the insane pace that he's shown up to this point. But ultimately, he can largely be ignored up in that first position. And we'll see if he does actually start the race in the end. But a lot of drivers electing to bring the session to a close, I believe. Yeah, we've got Josh heading out on the wet compound tyres, and I suppose if the race is going to be wet, then you can't blame drivers for getting out and getting a bit of practice. But yeah, so Bald taking that pole provisionally, and he's been asked to actually do the first lap of the race. So he will start the race. I expect he's probably just going to pull over at the start and let the field through. So effectively, it is a pole position for Palang. So he does start the race in the ideal position. So that's a little bit of a shame. I would have loved to see Bold ride. He's been going so well already in this session. I mean, a 103.6 is hard to argue with that. But sadly, not going to be able to contest the race proper. Griffin is still circulating out there. How much pace is still on the track? He may even improve on his time. Oh, just misses out. 105.6 as he goes spearing off into the wall and brings his session to a close in a rather dramatic fashion. I hope that that's going to go down well with the league admins and the stewards. We'll see. So right now, Josh is providing us with a little bit of action out there as the session time just draws to a close, and I think he's just going to run around this lap and try and get a grips. Of course, the track is nowhere near full wet tyres, but he's still going to go out there regardless. So, Ball taking the pole position in terms of the fastest time, but Palang effectively at the front of the grid and critically taking a big march on his championship rival Glock. So Palang off to the perfect start this evening, and Glock with a long way back. It is worth noting, of course, ahead of this race, the countback situation between the two. As we said, this championship is coming down to a margin of just 2 points between the top two heading into this race. But fortunately for Glock, he is down on points, and he is down substantially in terms of the qualifying so far tonight. But he does have 2 race victories on the season, whereas Palang is actually without a race win so far here in season 17. What that does mean that in any case, if they tie on points, the win will go the way of Glock on countback. So Glock does have that going for him, but he needs to make places in the race coming forward. Of course, it is going to be a wet race. It is going to be a bit of a spanner in the works for all of these drivers. So yeah, we'll see if Palang can hang on in there. It's going to be very difficult. I would love to run through the full qualifying order so far, but as you can see, my game has gone to black screen. So sadly, I don't think I'm quite going to be able to manage that. Just going in though, Palang does lead by 2 points in the standings, has the best position on the grid. If he wins this race, it doesn't matter what GLOCK does, that is going to spell an end to that championship, and it will go in favour of the Aston Martin driver. We head into the race, and currently it is dry, so we may be getting rain later on, just like we did in the qualifying session. Zeki in the chat saying the real question is, will DRS be active? That's a very good point after the race we had on Tuesday, the full interslick race with DRS being activated, which was very strange and probably very, very dangerous. Looking at some of the tyres, I've noticed in Ghost Garage that there's hard tyres selected. I do wonder if any of these guys are looking to extend all the way to the wet weather should it come later on. Of course, in the when you're in the garage and qualifying, it just says the block, so you say you might get rain in 45 minutes. When these guys are on the grid, they're seeing the weather forecast in much more detail, and of course, it may not be absolutely right, but yeah, that could affect the strategies. This is usually, of course, just the standard, as it is on this game, medium to hard, pitting probably just past the third distance if you're going for a normal dry strategy, but things are going to be different here tonight. Just getting a little bit of word from the drivers in the Discord. We may get rain at the very end of the race, but whether it's going to actually go to inters is the big question. Of course, on Tuesday, again, I keep referencing that race, but it was absolutely nuts. Of course, if you were watching, we saw drivers gambling on the slicks and ultimately not doing too badly on them. So maybe they'll try and extend all the way to that and hang on the slicks. Are others going to opt for the inters, maybe sacrificing an extra pit stop? It's going to be fascinating. Many different strategies could come into play and could very much throw off the potential results for this race. So we're about to head into it. Palang on top at the moment. We'll see if his title rival GLOCK can turn it around. There is just so much, of course, that the drivers have to be thinking about. They're on an unfamiliar layout. Overtaking is going to be difficult, as I said. Let's see how it's going to unfold in person, though, as we build up to the season finale with 5 red lights. And the Austria Reverse Grand Prix is go. Palang streaks away from the grid, and Lawrence sent to the wall, I think, at the back of the field. Away they go, heading in towards the first corner, with Palang leading from Hugo. Streaking clear, and then Aston Martin. He's in the best spot. Tracked by Hugo. Then Denko moves up. Great start. Goes up into third position. GLOCK is battling away there in the midfield, going through Bullseye side by side with Sweeross. Gets the better of the Red Bull, up to 6th. Very good start. He's done what he needed to do so far. Moving up in the order behind Sweeross is battling away with Ghost, the McLaren and the Red Bull locking horns as they go side by side up towards turn 7. Ghost on the hard compound tyres, trying to extend further in the race. It seems as though mediums is the call for most of the drivers, and that does seem to be the case at the front, with one major exception. Palang has opted to go for the hards and extend as long as possible. GLOCK's title rival has gone the other way, so this is going to be fascinating as positions change and drivers squabble up and down the field. Rick gets swamped by MX and by GLOCK himself, who's up another position to 5th. It's been a great start for the Ferrari. He chases down the kicks over in front with rear locking into the final corner, manages to just hold that car in line. Lawrence pits from the back of the field. We saw him pick up that damage off the line, just lining up the rears, and because of that battling though, MX, he got the move done on Rick, but now he's got to try and bridge a 1 second gap up towards the drivers in front. He's using a lot of battery to try and achieve that. Of course, the benefit he has, these drivers are being held back. Palang, we know he's got great pace around this track, but going on hards, he's not quite going to have the grip in these early laps of the drivers behind. And Hugo and Denko will each be looking to try and pick their way through as quickly as possible and try and make use of those mediums while they are still the tyre to be on. down the back straight now towards the hairpin. 3/10 is the difference. Hugo is gaining rapidly up towards the outside to go. Palang making sure to couple that one off. Hugo not opting for any rash moves just yet. We'll see if he can pounce on the exit. DRS is going to be active again. 3/10 the difference. Palang doesn't want to let this lead go just yet. Hugo is gaining on him rapidly though. Up towards the outside he goes with the closing speed, and Palang just has to let that one go. So Hugo, like he was in Tier 2, going straight to the lead on the second lap of the Grand Prix and leads them away over the line. Can he create the same gap he could on Tuesday? Jenko now chasing down Palang. MX managed to come across into DRS, and GLOCK has come with him. GLOCK is very much in the game here, and his championship rival is not far up the road. It's been a very good start for him as Sui Ross gets the first time penalty of the race, and certainly with track limits around this track will probably not be the last. It is so difficult to keep it within the white lines here at the Red Bull Ring. So Sui Ross is losing out from that so far. How much of a difference, I wonder, will the track limit penalties make? Up at the front, Hugo is making a big move, burning a lot of battery, trying to shake Palang off. Palang though holding on with DRS. He can use that to his advantage down the straights. As further back, Rick seems to be sliding through the field. Sui Ross is all over him. Rick overcooking the braking too, heading into turn 8. Sui Ross trying to come at him. Of course he is down with that penalty, needs to make ground early, and he's going to sweep past Rick to P6, chase down the leaders from now on. That is going to be the goal for the Red Bull driver. Rick having to concede that one. Not a great run to the final corner from Sui Ross, mind you, and Rick is going to come back with that DRS down the main straight, pull to the inside, and there's nothing Sui Ross can do to defend it. That is the power of that DRS comeback, and he gets the move done. But they are being distanced for the group in front. Oh my goodness, Rick, all over the road, heading through turn number 2. Manages to just keep that car in a line though, the Haas man maintaining 6th position, but these guys are hemorrhaging time to the leaders, and those kinds of mistakes are not going to help. Ghost on the hards already seems to be being held back in terms of pace. Plenty of battery to use. Can he make use of it? Up at the front, it is still Hugo leading away. Palang though, the tyre delta is going to start equalising pretty quickly, and he's keeping himself very much in contention with the race leader. So Palang doing a solid job. GLOCK is working hard to stay with that top 4. So maybe missing a little bit of raw pace at this point. Palang, after that great start from GLOCK and having to concede the lead himself, seems to be stabilising things and holding firm nicely in that 2nd position. Further behind, there's got to be moves here. Rick is really struggling to match the pace of the drivers out in front. There's been a lot of sketchy moments, but Sui Ross again not getting the run around the last corner he needed. He still closes fast down the straight, but can't quite find the move, and then Dirty Air kicks in. Ghost runs wide and gets a time penalty. Already these penalties coming in as Rick is round! Rick is round! And that, I have to say, has been coming. The Haas driver has been teetering on the edge of a spin, and sadly for him, that has become the case here on lap 5 of this Austria Reverse Grand Prix. Behind Sui Ross losing places too. Sui Ross lost out to Ghost, and his teammate Kevin is round the outside. They bang wheels ever so slightly. Kevin trying to force his way through. Sui Ross not backing down on the outside. He's going to get squeezed to the edge of the track. An oversteer betrays Kevin O'Reilly, and he has to let that one go. That allows Ghost to scamper up the road, and he can make the best use of his hard tyres to try and move his way up the order as Lewis with a big lunge and pushes Kevin O'Reilly all the way into the gravel. That, I think, is going to be one for the sure. It's Lewis getting aggressive, trying to make use of those hard tyres himself. They're already coming into play, but that's been very costly for both drivers involved, sadly, and they drop down to the rear of the train. Up at the front, Palang is through! Palang is through on Newholm. Takes the lead away from the Williams driver. Hard tyres are coming right into their own, and Palang has the head of the field, and even better use for him. GLOCK has been distanced from this train. He hasn't quite been able to live with the pace. Palang looking much, much stronger now. His pace is coming into its own. We know from qualifying he's quick round here. I mean, he's always quick in qualifying. Not always so in the race, but right now he is running superbly out there. And despite the pressure of this title battle, that said, he pulls all the way over to the side of the track. Not sure if that was an error or just a move, a tactical move. He certainly doesn't seem interested in giving it up too quickly. Forces Hugo up to the outside, and MX tries to take advantage, sweeping round the outside of Denko and looking to try and take that podium away. Denko, though, is not going to back down. He's going to get a bit of slipstream too from the drivers in front, trying to stay with him. They're going 2 by 2 in the lead battles. Hugo takes the lead back for Palang, and MX completes the move on Denko, getting himself up into that third position. And that battling has given Glock the way back in that he needed, and he manages to get himself in there. Hugo still leads the way. Palang unable to quite hold on to that lead again. Not sure what happened at turn 7 on the previous lap. He's still in pursuit though, trying to stay with Hugo. It's a group of 5 for the lead early in Austria, and they've managed to establish themselves over the rest. Again, we can't forget rain is on its way potentially later on in the Grand Prix. So that's certainly one to look out for. Rick and Josh have come in for a set of the hard tyres, and I imagine it's going to be a case of just going as far as you can physically go. Denko looking for revenge on MX, but can't quite find any opening heading in to the hairpin. Has to yield that one for now. Palang having a couple of moments of the rear end, just stepping out, but he's keeping himself very much in the game, chasing down Hugo, heading down towards that final corner. We'll see if he can get the move done heading into turn 1. Hugo with the rear end stepping out. Palang is going to look that. His eyes are turning to dinner plates as he chases down the Williams, heading down towards turn 1, but ultimately lifting off the throttle, he decides that now is not the time to move through. He's exercising a lot of patience here, and of course he needs to. Keeping the mistakes down is going to be key. Further back, Enge making a move done on Jack, but runs it wide, overcooks it, and Jack and Koru are both going to slip their way through. Enge, he must have made quite a few places. He's up actually only up 2 places in the race thus far. Koru, on the other hand, has made up plenty of ground. Now he can try and attack Jack, although that's not going to help his cause, making a bit of an error. Kevin O'Reilly on the comeback trail, trying to get to Lewis, ultimately can't quite find a way through the Alpine, as these two, no love lost between them clearly here in this Austrian reverse Grand Prix. The field splitting into 2 very distinct groups, with Sui Ross hovering just in front of this train and Ghost very much in his own race, but roughly matching the pace of the race leaders at this stage. Looking back though, Enge is dropping down places. Enge, he's gone off at the hairpin. Not sure if that's by contact or if it is his own error, but nevertheless slipping down the field. We've got multiple moves, it's hard to keep up with him. Palang takes away the lead of the race, and further back, Koru manages to get the move done on Jack Olako. Moves up into P8, so making up yet another position in this race. Of course, the Rainmaster will be hoping that this rain does come earlier on in the race as possible, so he can try and make ground in conditions that favour him best. He's got Sui Ross, he's got Ghost, both those guys with penalties. He's looking very, very strong so far in this race, looking for a solid point score. But right now, it is a tale of 5 drivers really at the front of this race. That said, Palang looking to try and end that. He's gone to the front, immediately puts pressure on Hugo to stay in that DRS range. Hugo, of course, will have 3 consecutive DRS zones to rescue that situation, but he's going to be put under increasing pressure. It seems as though the pace is firmly with the Aston Martin driver, the championship leader, looking to try and stretch clear in this Grand Prix. And I think the next lap may be a bit of an opening for him to try and break clear. He'll certainly be wanting for that to be the case, as Glock comes in very early. That's earlier than I was anticipating. A lot of pit stops happening. He slows it right down, very cautious, heading into the pit lane. It's going to be a set of hard tyres to go as far as he can. Of course, he may be thinking about the rain and thinking, I'm going to go to inters at the end, so maybe I can afford to get off these mediums onto these hards, try and grab that little bit of an undercut. Sui Ross gets yet another time penalty. That's 6 seconds, and not doing his race much favours at all. So we're down to 4 up at the front. Palang trying to stretch away. Hugo has responded a bit better on this lap. He's just about managed to stay within that range. Palang, though, with so much grip through every corner, and Hugo is having to contend with that dirty air as well. Further back, Lewis and Kevin O'Reilly are still battling away. The Alpine managing to see off the Red Bull on this occasion. I'm wondering if we're going to see pit stops amongst some of the race leaders. In particular, they'll be fully aware that GLOCK has come in. GLOCK also has plenty of clean air to use. He's going to have hard runners in front that he's going to run into in a few laps. But right now, he's looking very strong. Hugo must be aware of that. He dives into the pit lane. Both the kick servers remaining out there, and that opens up that gap too to Palang running out front now. He doesn't have to worry about DRS to the drivers behind, but we'll see if what MX can do. But Palang running very, very strongly. Hugo is in though, and we'll see where he emerges in relation to GLOCK and how powerful that undercut may potentially be. We're approaching a third distance in this Austrian Grand Prix. The Williams driver getting himself up to speed. The Ferrari driver coming around. That pit exit is a bit sketchy, of course, in this layout, but it doesn't seem as though the undercut has done much good for GLOCK. He's going to get himself into DRS just about, but not really gaining much in terms of on track as Ghost picks up yet another penalty. Both he and Sway Ross struggling a little bit more with the track limits. I'm not sure, of course, if they are legit penalties, but we'll have to assume they are for the moment and see what happens in the stewards room later on. As we've got yellows further back. Not sure. I think that's the RB of Lawrence having a nightmare out there on circuit now. He's already had a pit stop, and yet he is well adrift of the rest of the grid at this moment. So yeah, better luck for Lawrence. It hasn't been a great season here in Tier 1. Further up the road, the two kick servers, they're extending a little bit longer, going to what I would say is a more typical pit stop in a full dry race to go from the mediums onto the hard tyres. But of course, one of them is probably not going to get the pit stop lap that they were after, as Denko is fuel light coming on. He's clearly not put as much in as some of the other drivers. We'll see if that's going to cause him any grief further down the line in this Austrian Grand Prix. But right now, he may be pushing for pit lane priority. Watch for that battle between himself and MX. Both those guys have been comprehensively shelled by Palang. Once Palang was able to break that DRS, the Aston Martin driver was well on his way. He's sacrificing a bit to most of his rivals in this race with that undercut. But we'll see if it's going to work for him later on in the race. Of course, they may be looking to extend to rain. Who knows at this stage? But Palang running out there very, very nicely and comfortably out in front. Further back, Griffin is looking to try and attack Jackalacco. Not able to find his way through. Jack is extended long on those medium tyres as into the pits comes Lawrence to bring his race to a close, sadly. So that's one driver down to 17 in the race as MX elects to come in, and of course that was his right as the lead driver. He comes in, and we'll see where he comes out in relation to both Hugo and GLOCK, who have both caught up to the back of Enge. Enge, of course, in the Williams. You wonder if he's not going to give his teammate for the night much grief. Hugo sets the fastest lap of the race and critically gets a car between himself and GLOCK. MX coming out of the pits, but you could see the power of that undercut. He has been long since dropped by the rest of these guys. GLOCK there attacking Enge, and Enge not proving to put up much resistance. He's still going to fade her around the outside though. Oh my goodness. GLOCK sweeping his way in, and of course with a championship on the line, that is a big risk, but luckily no contact made. He's still got to keep Hugo very much in his sights. They're both getting caught up in a bit of a DRS strain though, led by Koru, dragging along both the Alpines. Then it's these two guys fighting for big net position. The likes of MX, Denko and Palang will all be hoping these guys get held back, but Hugo is making sure none of that is happening. He is to the inside of Lewis. It's a battle for traction on the exit, but there's a 10 lap difference in tyres, and in the end Lewis just has to let that go. Hugo trying to keep that buffer to GLOCK as well further down the line, and also MX has been distanced, of course, due to that overcut strategy that he used. Griffin is next up, and then Koru, and then Home Hug. Hugo can get himself firmly marching on in this race. Look at the grip he has, but ultimately deciding not to send it heading into turn 2. Probably a sensible decision. He's put himself in with a real shot in this race, so he's got to try and work his way through. Can he do it? Catching a little bit of dirty air, heading through the middle of turn 4, looking up to the outside, not quite finding it. Similarly, GLOCK trying to find his way through on the other Alpine further back. Is he setting up a move into turn 7, I wonder? He looks to the inside, he's going to go for it on that narrow line. Can he find the traction? He certainly can. Yuvamab goes up into position number 5, and next up is Koru, and it's going to be easy pickings too with DRS. Hugo cruising through the train and leaving GLOCK for dead. GLOCK to the inside is off the road in front as Griffin leaves his braking too late into the hairpin. That's going to be good news for GLOCK. He gets both the Alpines in in one go. Next up, Koro. Can he find the way through quickly and keep himself in contact with the Williams man out in front? Palang still leads the way from Denko. Denko doing a wonderful job, it has to be said, of managing those medium tyres, keeping them alive. The gap 3 seconds to Palang. He's not quite been able to match the race leader's pace, of course, the championship leader's pace, but considering, of course, the tyre difference between the two, that's a very commendable performance from Denko so far. He's keeping himself competitive. The question is, though, how much is he going to lose to those undercutters? Hugo is making big progress, just 5 seconds behind Ghost, with a pit stop already in play, and Glock suffering from being caught behind Koru. Can he find a way through? Koru is going to defend this one off. Oh my goodness, Glock is into the back of him. Glock, the Ferrari, into the back of the Aston Martin, and damage, front wing end plate damage for the championship contender. Glock coming back at him now. He's going to be furious as Koru blocks all over the road. Glock dives to the inside, gets it stopped and turned in, and ultimately gets the move done. But my oh my, just how costly is that going to be? He weaves from one side of the track to the other in frustration, but that is a better blow to his championship chances. Palang has dove into the pit lane. Not sure if that's in any sort of response. He's been held up by Rick's retired AI car though. So bit of bad fortune for Palang too. And he would have probably emerged a couple of seconds further up the road. So there is going to be work to do for Palang. He's given up track possession. But Glock's damage, my goodness me, could be an absolutely pivotal moment in this championship fight. Glock was already down in the first stint. He kept himself in there nicely, but how much pace is this going to cost him? He's already 4.5 seconds adrift of Hugo, a driver that he was tailing for the majority of this race. He's going to have plenty of straight line speed, that's for one. But, oh, his MX goes to the grass to get his way past Lewis and does, in the end, get that manoeuvre done. Now, I do want to talk strategy here. Palang has opted for a set of the medium tyres, and in no uncertain terms, they are going to be almost impossible to extend to the end of the race unless he has a silk touch on the tyres. He is banking, I think, on rain interfering and allowing him that opportunity to go on to a set of intermediate tyres further down the road. So we'll see how that's going to work out for Palang. Again, maybe he is actually trying to extend and proving me wrong, but I think that's going to be a mammoth task for the championship leader. At the moment, I think his priority is going to be chasing down Glock. Glock is losing about half a second a lap to Hugo, possibly even more. In these high-speed corners, believe me, he is going to suffer. With that damage, it's further back. Lewis, oh, he's been in the wars in this race, involved in all sorts of incidents and drama, and yet more drama as he spins his Alpine around. Down there at turn number 2, he gets back on his way again. Didn't see the nature of that, unfortunately. There were certainly a few cars that he was battling out there, but in the end, having to fall back as Ghost works his way swiftly past Sway Ross. He's opted for a very similar strategy to Palang and going onto those mediums and trying to go as far as possible, presumably hoping again for rain to kick in later on in the Grand Prix. We'll see if that's going to work out as MX comes up to the back of Glock and makes the move stick. Glock just cannot keep him at bay with that front wing damage. He's going to struggle to stay in DRS range too. The front wing damage coupled with the dirty air and the impending pressure of his championship rival chasing him down all the way, getting himself increasingly into range. 1.2 seconds is the difference between the two cars, and very quickly chasing down Glock. He may still hang on to DRS on this lap. He will just about. Does have plenty of battery to use, and he's going to need to hold DRS for as long as possible to have any chance of holding Palang back. But is that going to be the case? Palang, again, strategy could come into it. The skies are still looking pretty bright out there, it has to be said. There's still very clear shadows on and around the circuit, so I don't think it's going to rain imminently, and I think we are still going to have to wait for some time. If that's not the case, Palang may still have to go an awful long way on those mediums, so this may not be over just yet. Glock, though, he'll certainly be looking to try and keep Palang behind on the circuit, but what chance does he stand of that with the Aston Martin driver hawking him down towards turn 1? Glock using all the battery he has, but what kind of downforce does he have? The advantage he does have is Palang draws ever nearer. He does have the contend with that dirty air, but look at the closing speed. He's going to the inside. Championship rivals going to battle here, and they touch. They touch on the entry in a turn 4. Palang is wide, and GLOCK does, in the end, just about hang on to the place. Nervous moments between these two. GLOCK contending with that damage, trying to hold him back. He defends the inside line fiercely, forcing Palang to the outer regions of the track, but now DRS, I think, is going to make this an inevitability. GLOCK is using the battery. He's doing everything he can. Is Palang going to wait, I wonder, for another potential opportunity further down the road? That seems to be the case. GLOCK, I have to say, judging his breaking point really nicely, heading into that hairpin and holding Palang back just for a little bit longer. Palang, I think, is trying to make sure he does not get counter-attacked in any sense. He wants to get this one done sharper. She knows GLOCK has very little to lose, but he is so close. Heading onto the straight, he's going to pull to the outside. Can GLOCK hang on to this? Round the outside goes Palang. Is this the move that defines a champion? It may well be. Palang goes up to third position on the road, dispatches of GLOCK. GLOCK using the battery. He's acting out of pure desperation now, but I think that in these high-speed corners, Palang is simply just going to put more and more distance between himself and his rival and maybe just drop him out of DRS for good. And in fact, it looks as though he's done just that. GLOCK has done virtually all he can to try and hang on in this race, but in this championship too. But at the moment, it seems as though he is going to have to hope for a miracle. Palang up to P3 on the road, and that's the critical move on his rival GLOCK, and he looks to try and put one hand on that championship trophy. It is certainly not job done, of course, for Palang, but it's looking very solid for that. Just looking into the chat, Zeki asking, why did Palang box before Denko? It is probably to try and give himself the best window. He didn't want to give himself too much of an overcut, I imagine, to most of his rivals. So he wanted to try and keep himself solidly in terms of track position. Ultimately, that's given him a very long stint on the mediums. Denko, on the other hand, a much more comfortable stint on the hards to the end of the race. He extended quite a long way, of course, on the mediums himself. But now he has plenty of freedom. Those tyres will more than easily get to the end of the race. He's going to have plenty of pace too, as he is the next driver to chase down GLOCK out there on the track. So he's given himself that sort of strategic flexibility. Palang's strategy is a little bit riskier, which is why I'm saying this championship is not quite over just yet. He may well be forced into an involuntary two-stop. We'll see how that goes. That said, though, the amount of time that he is pulling on GLOCK, and it's quite a short pit lane too, I think it's going to make things much more difficult for the Ferrari man going forward. So, heading on to the 22nd lap with Hugo still leading comfortably. Barely mentioned him in the last few laps. He managed to jump ahead of the field through that undercut. Of course, the damage to GLOCK certainly helped his case, but navigating the traffic beautifully, having altogether stellar pace and just making all the right moves. He's clearly gelling at this track and looks on his way to the moment and another victory. We'll see how it's going to go, but again, he is still on tyres that should make it to the end of the race. Not easily, mind you. The hard tyres will be a bit of a stretch even from there. But he's still looking oh so strong out there with a 6-second lead on MX. MX does have the tyre advantage, but 6 seconds is quite a significant gap to try and chase down. Next battle on the track, Denko, the next driver, to attack GLOCK, and GLOCK just has nothing to defend with. I think he knew it. He saved a lot of battery. Maybe he can counter on the run down towards the final corner, but that lock-up through the hairpin is not going to help. He's going to try and deploy that battery now, but Denko is just so much faster, and he's very smartly using his battery too. He knows that counter-attack threat is going to come, but GLOCK just cannot follow through these high and mid-speed corners. He's got a good run through the last corner, mind you, and he is going to try everything he can, try as he might to chase down Denko, but I think his resistance is going to fall as Denko moves clear up in a 4th place in this race. He has, of course, got some of the best tyres in the field as GLOCK runs wide, gets a time penalty. That's going to work against him, even if there is a late safety car now. Hugo also picks up a penalty, though, so maybe this fight at the front is not over. That said, I still think it's going to be a tall task for anyone else on this grid. Right now, the pendulum in the championship is swinging even further the way of this man. He's got little challenge on the track. Denko may be able to chase him down. In fact, he is, I think, going to gain in the laps to come. But Palang can afford that. Glock is his biggest challenger, and right now, he is pulling time on Glock hand over fist. Also, just to note, the cloud cover is looking a little bit more menacing now. So we'll see if that is going to be a factor later on. But yeah, the clouds are rolling in here in Styria. So maybe rain is going to come maybe a bit earlier than some of the drivers would have hoped. Koru making a move on Enchi was another driver who extended long on the hards, has gone to the mediums, and is now working hard to try and make gains in terms of track position. He's crucially managed to avoid a time penalty up to this stage in the race. Now in P9, chasing down Jackalacco in P8. Of course, a couple of drivers with penalties in front to contend with. Oh my goodness, he nearly loses the car into turn 1. That's not going to help his charge. Just as I was complimenting him on another snap heading out of turn 2, manages to recover. But dropping out of DRS briefly, if Jackalacco was going to have to work hard to get his way back in. Further up the road, Ghost is the next driver to challenge Glock. He's also going to be nursing those mediums as deep in the race as he can go. Let's see what he can do, though. Heading down, you can see Glock. He's got plenty of straight line speed, it must be said. He seems to have quite low wings and, well, even less downforce on that car with the damage in play. Ghost trying to chase him down, of course. Ghost, I think, is another driver, yes, with 6 seconds of penalties to his name. I think only Sweeros has more. Kevin also has 6 seconds. Kevin, just as I was mentioning him, has gone off the road at the hairpin, rejoins the track in that Red Bull. Is going to get caught by JB in the Ferrari, who's going to blast past him on the run down. And Kevin, he does have an open rear wing. Does he have front wing damage, though? I think on the evidence of that boxing, he does. And sadly for Kevin O'Reilly, it is not proving to be his night in what's been a torrid Tier 1 season so far, it must be said. The gap at the front is coming down. 5.5 seconds. MX still trying to work his way back in. The gap between these guys is also coming down. Palang is starting to fall away a little bit with those medium tyres not quite working like they were before. He's certainly going to be hoping for rain at this stage in the race. Again, the 2-stop may have to come into play. We shall see. Denko, though, is going to look to try and pick his way past. He lights up the rear tyres, though, as he plants down that throttle pedal, chasing down the Aston Martin. And I think Palang is it just going to let that one go. So through goes Denko to P3. Palang, I think, fighting other battles, deciding that one's not worth fighting. Ghost and Glock barreling down to the last corner together, and Ghost gets the move done, punches away and tries to use all of his battery. Glock is going to desperately fight back against the McLaren, goes to the inside of the first corner. Ghost is stranded on the outside, looks for a switchback, but the momentum is not quite there. Really good driving from Glock. He is defending desperately and fiercely on those aging hard tyres with that end plate damage, but Ghost does have the speed on him. Look at the difference in that high speed corner. Ghost with so much more downforce to use. But as of yet, he's still been frustrated by the Ferrari driver. He needs to try and pull out a gap too with the 6 seconds of penalties if he wants to get the beating of him here tonight. And he's got to worry about Koru too. And is that the first signs of rain falling on the circuit, I wonder? I think I just spotted it. I think the rain is incoming. Just over 10 laps from the flag. Hugo leads this race comfortably, but is there a curveball being thrown? Again, I may have to double check. I'm not 100% sure if the rain has started falling already, but I think it very well might have. We shall see. 10 laps to go in this Tier 1 season. Heading down, this seems to be the premium battle out there on the circuit. Glock trying to fend Ghost off, and Ghost at the moment unable to complete the move. He's making the Ferrari driver, though, drain his battery, and the fighting potential of Glock's Ferrari is worsening at the moment, so Ghost may be able to find his way through in short order. I may have been chatting a load of rubbish saying that the rain had started, but certainly it's getting much bleaker out there on the track, and I do think it may be rain very, very soon. It certainly is a contrast from the bright sunny skies that we had earlier in the race. We'll see if Ghost can try and get this move done. He gets very close to the rear wing of the Ferrari, cuts back for traction on the exit as the rear wing of GLOCK's car squirming around, but Ghost unable to draw quite with him just yet. He is going to have to wait and bide his time. He doesn't seem to have the straight line speed as at the back of the grid. That's actually, I didn't realise Bald's car was still running. He's dove into the pit lane at the end of lap 26 for him. Ghost, can he get this move done? He doesn't seem to be getting the runs to the last corner. That's a better one. He runs over track limits and gets yet another time penalty. That's 9 seconds. He's really struggled with the white lines in this race. He closes in on GLOCK, but just not enough. He runs into the back of him too on the entrance to turn 1. I think no harm really done there. Just a difference in the entrance speed between the two drivers. But Ghost, in the end, having to tuck in. It definitely isn't rain, by the way, as of yet, so apologies for calling that one a little bit wrong. You can see GLOCK, he's just so far off the pace through these corners, and I think maybe almost deliberately so. He is running out of grip, of course, out there, but Ghost, he is frustrated behind him. He looks to the inside, trying to force an error, and he may well have done so. That's much closer than he's been in the last couple of laps. Both of them now on that battery. GLOCK certainly with more straight line speed, but Ghost using that DRS to draw up and alongside, heading down towards the hairpin, breaks deep, locks the rears a little bit. He manages to get the move done for now, but his rear end is twitching on the exit. And GLOCK now can use his straight line speed, but he does not have the DRS. Ghost managed to hang on to that. He timed it perfectly, and he does have that possession. Now he can push it all the way through the last corner, get a strong exit, and I think that move might as well just be done. Ghost to P5 and finally gets that move done as Sui Ross, who came into the pits for a set of fresh mediums, picks up yet another penalty, and I think that puts him up to 12 seconds in this race. He's really struggled throughout tonight. Has solid pace, but ultimately been unable to make much use of it. Still, the rain seems to be holding off. Still, it is Hugo leading comfortably. That gap to MX is coming down ever so slowly. But right now, it seems to be very much in hand. He does have older tyres, but he's managing them well. MX unable to quite chase down the gap, and Denko may be a threat to him with 4-lap younger tyres and some of the best pace out of anyone on circuit at the moment. The Greek driver, 3 seconds adrift of MX. He had to pit later on. Now he's just trying to make up that difference. 3 seconds is the difference. We'll see if he can try and chase that down. Palang next up. Pace falling away on the mediums, and he's going to try and just nurse these home now. Again, I wasn't sure about taking these mediums this long way. He felt confident that he could manage it. His championship virtually depends on that. If he can keep these tyres going all the way to the end of the race, then the title is virtually guaranteed, and that is rain. That is certainly rain now falling on the track. And yes, can verify, rain is now falling. So inside the final 7 laps of this season, now the long promised, long awaited rain is finally here to stay. Let's see if it's going to get to intermediates though. JB is elected to come into the pits from P13. Is it going to be set of the enters? This is surely going to be too early, you would think. But whether it's going to go to enters fully and whether it's going to be worth the extra pit stop, those are going to be the questions that we're going to be asking in the next couple of minutes. We'll see how this rain is going to affect the track surface. Hugo is beginning to hemorrhage time to MX, it must be said, and with that time penalty, you never know. But is that changeover going to happen? Looking to the pit lane, the McLaren of Josh elects to come in. Palang is really the car that I'm interested in, though. He is going to dive in. He was banking on this rain. Into the pits comes Palang. GLOCK, for his championship, for his sake, he surely has to stay out and just hope of hopes. But no, he's going to come in as well. Maybe it is just going to be too heavy. He clocks the barrier too of the pit entry. These guys now, they're going to be on the same tyres. Palang is way ahead on the track. He doesn't have a penalty to his name. Surely, unless he bends it, this championship is going the way of the Aston Martin driver. He just has to keep it on the black stuff, and this title is going to be his. He's going to have to adapt to the change in handling rather quickly as he gets onto the enters. Lots of drivers have elected to come in. Of course, those drivers who were extending a long way, who'd come in earlier maybe to get the hards on, or even just extended long, or should I say pitted early on the hard tyres and gone to the mediums earlier. those tyres clearly were not getting to the end of the race, and they were praying for rain to come in. Well, thankfully for Palang's sake and for a number of other drivers in this race, it has come, and they can try and manage it. Of course, it's not quite there just yet. Oh my goodness, Hugo! Hugo has gone long into the pit lane. 10-second time penalty is gonna be gutting for his chances in this race. The Williams driver has driven so imperiously up to this point, but is that going to be the decisive moment in this Austrian Grand Prix? Both the Kick-Sauber drivers are staying out. But surely, unless he has a monumental pace advantage, that's not going to work in his favour. He's got a huge gap to the next drivers. That is going to be Palang. Palang is going to be the next driver behind on the track. 13 seconds of penalties it is for Hugo. That gap is going to sit very close to that. Hugo, he's going to lose a little bit. It's Sui Rosso, next driver, to speed into the pit lane. Hugo, he does have, at the very least, a 15-second gap on Palang, so this may not be over just yet, depending on what these Kick-Saubers do. Denko is hunting down MX. These guys, what are they going to do as Sui Ross is elected to bring his evening to a close? Home Hug, though, let's see what the pace differential is going to be like. Watch the gap in this hairpin, 10.5 seconds on the brakes. He flicks it in, and the gap melts. It just melts, and MX recognises that. He's got a shot at the win here, and he comes in critically, I think, at the right point. He did lose a little bit of time. Maybe he should have come in a lap earlier, but with the penalties for Hugo, you sense that the biggest threat to this win may well be his teammate, but his teammate in that Kick-Sauber has been forced to stay out a lap longer. We know that the slick tyres are falling away, so right now it's looking pretty good for MX. Where is he going to be in relation to Palang on the circuit? He's going to be comfortably ahead of Palang. It looks like he emerges, and he's even about 8 to 9 seconds, it'll turn out, behind, sorry, I was looking at the wrong gap. He's about 10 seconds behind Hugo. So that gap, he's got 3 seconds in hand. He can't really afford a track limits penalty, but right now MX, he's got plenty of time in hand over Palang. He's got very fresh tyres. Denko, I think, is gonna, let's see if he's gonna make the gamble, but the gap to Hugo is chasing down rapidly, and I think he may have to try and bite the might have to bite the bullet and come in. He's lacking grip substantially. He's gained track position in the meantime, but it's not a big pit loss here, and he may still be able to save a great result. He doesn't have penalties too up to this point in the race, and I think he's going to make the smart and logical decision and come in to the pit lane. So Denko is going to emerge from the race lead. We'll see where he emerges, but that is going to put Hugo in the commanding lead on track, but with penalties swinging the way of MX for the time being, and Palang firmly in pole position for the championship now. As I said a few laps ago, he just has to keep it on the black stuff, and this title is his. Denko will emerge. Let's see where he comes out. He may well be somewhat close to Palang. He did stay out a couple of laps longer. He is going to still jump the Aston Martin driver, though. He won't have quite as much speed on the exit, and Palang may get a little bit nearer, but Denko, he's going to come through comfortably in that third position, and if he has great pace in these last few laps, who knows, he may even be able to chase down Hugo with those 13 seconds of penalties. It's going to be a tough ask, but actually Hugo's pace is putting this race win in a bit of doubt. That gap coming up towards 12 seconds, 13 seconds is the magic number. And maybe, just maybe, he's making himself a chance at this. He is a pure specialist around this circuit. That there could be no question of. And here in these wet conditions, he continues to come alive. We saw how good he was in these interslick conditions on Tuesday. And he is putting the former 3-time champion of Tier 1 under serious pressure here. 12.2 seconds the gap, 2 to go, and well, the championship may have not ended in the grandstand finish we were hoping for. Palang just nursing the car home. In terms of this race victory, we're getting a stellar finish. MX can't quite match the pace of Hugo at the moment in these wet conditions, and the Williams driver is giving himself a real chance here. And look at that! The gap shooting up all the time. This is simply remarkable. This man is incredible at this track. He is unbelievable, evidently, in these conditions. And he is absolutely monstering the rest of this APP Tier 1 grid. He's never made an appearance in APP Tier 1. And right now, he is making absolute mincemeat of the competition, unless he gets another penalty. Well, I thought we were going to get a grandstand finish. In the end, this may be a victory lap. He's got to keep it within the black stuff still. He's got to avoid mistakes. MX can still capitalise if mistakes do fall foul of the Williams driver, but heading on to the 36th lap, he is clear and gone. 3/10 is the difference in terms of the net gap. MX, he just lost so much time in the first half of the lap. Hugo looks set here. He comes into the last lap with a slender advantage, but the way that advantage is trending, it looks to be going his way. Further back, Palang, he is nursing the car home, that is for sure. He's not taking risks. He's been getting chased down rapidly by Ghost, and Glock is working his way back towards him too, but I think it is just going to be too little too late. Palang is nearly there. I'm sure his heart is going to be absolutely in his mouth, but if he can keep it on the road, this championship is going to go his way. We'll cut though to the front of the field because Hugo, well, it looked as a few laps ago as if this race was going to go the way of MX. It is in the end a comprehensive win, and MX is not slow. He is not losing time to the likes of Denko, certainly not to Palang, but right now he is just drawing ever further clear. The man who dominated Tier 2 on Tuesday is going to do no different to Tier 1, and Hugo comes up to the line for a sensational victory. Forget the time penalty. This race is his, and he is dominated this race, winning by a huge margin on track. MX, a very honourable second position. Be gutted not to get the win, but ultimately a fine drive himself. Denko crosses the line down there in third position. A great podium for him, but further back, Palang, he has come through all the trials and tribulations, and he is your champion of APP Tier 1. Just getting the best of Glock. Commiserations to Glock. It's still a great drive considering the damage he was nursing through much of that race. He did get that wing fixed in the pit lane. But in the end, 6 seconds is the difference. He had great speed at the end of the race. Palang, though, just managing to coax that car home, do what he needed to do, and he is your APP Tier 1 champion. What a drive. What a season. I'm sure he didn't come into this season expecting to win this championship. He's managed to come to this without winning a single race in the end, and had some mistakes along the way. I do remember Singapore in particular as a race that got away for him. It hasn't been a perfect season by any means, but in the end, it has simply been a better season than everyone else. You can only beat who's in front of you, and that is exactly what Palang has done. I believe they finished 4 and 5 on the track, so the gap is going to be 3 points in the end in favour of Palang. Richly well deserved, and again, commiserations to Glock here. Drove a great race, but ultimately that one single incident just getting in the way, losing that front wing. I'm not sure how much of a difference it would have made, but he wasn't that far away in the end on track from Palang, and I think we may have been robbed of a true grandstand finish to this season. Again, no doubt about the winner on the night, Hugo. I think we may be seeing him in Tier 1 a lot more often after that performance. I mean, he's clearly a specialist around this track, but he clearly also just has phenomenal raw speed and managed the race beautifully, and especially in those wet conditions. The gap 1.1 to MX, but that does not tell the full story. It is not a rare thing when you can get a penalty for speeding in the pit lane and still come through with the race victory from MX. Denko, a great podium in the end. I think another driver we're going to be seeing more of in Tier 1. Palang P4, that is all he needed on the day, with Glock gaining P5. He was gaining a lot at the end of the race, but just too little too late. Jackalacco, a very solid P6 from Koru in P7. Ghost, penalties betraying him, then Eng Griffin round out the top 10. Lewis JB, Kevin, Josh, I think that's the last of the finishers out on track in the end. So, time to reflect, I suppose. That is Tier 1 in the books. This phenomenal championship week in APP that we all love has crowned a new champion. And well, what can you say about Palang? He's, like I said, he hasn't had a perfect season up to this point. There's been mistakes, there's been races that got away, but ultimately he's just scored more points on more occasions than everyone else in this tier, and that is simply enough sometimes to see it through. And he joins the list of Vardy, MX, Kiernan, Ghost, Lifebout, Chris, Bald, Finlay, and now Palang, your Tier 1 champions of APPF1. What a season it's been again. I know it's I don't usually do these streams. We should have Louis back in a regular order next season. Got Emil in the chat asking, stating rather, that if Hugo doesn't get driver of the day, it'd be the biggest robbery of 2025. Well, you know what? I didn't give him driver of the day in Tier 2, courtesy of a great comeback drive from Rubialski, but yeah, I think given the way he's driven all the way throughout this week, I think it's only fair to award that the way of our race winner for just an imperious drive, and having to come through adversity, just showing so much raw speed. Again, really no one other than the likes of Finlay, Red Flame Joe win races by such huge margins out on track in Tier 1. So for him to pull that one off is quite simply remarkable. Just to clear up as well, the Drivers' Championship does not go the way of Glock, but he will get the commiseration, or well, the consolation I should say, of winning that Constructors' Battle alongside Pearly Orange. So congratulations to those two as well. So yeah, great job to all of that. And yes, thank you, Emil. Yeah, I knew that one was a bit of a harsh one, not giving him the award, given how dominant he was in that race on Tuesday. But yeah, I don't think you can really argue with that performance here tonight in this kind of company. That was a phenomenal bit of driving. I won't keep my waffle going for too much longer though. But yeah, great season finale. Again, congratulations thoroughly to Palang, and I guess we'll see if he's going to be able to defend that title next season. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of drivers who are going to have something to say and do about that. But that is just to be remaining and see. Yeah, thanks Emil yet again. And yeah, normally of course this isn't my bag, this Tier 1, but hopefully I've put on a great show for you here tonight, just as the drivers have done. But I think with just about all that needs to be said and done for me tonight, thank you all very much for watching, and until next season, we'll see you later.